turbulence up ahead, reach out to the pilot's planner. Back for another edition of the Wealthy Pilots Podcast with Scott Osborn. And we're going to continue our conversation about contingency planning, which I think has been really fascinating, Scott, to kind of think about some of these things and apply some of that military concepts and some of the things that we've kind of shared a little bit when it comes to just having a good strategy, having a good plan, and thinking about the things that can and do happen, you know? So how you doing this week, my friend?
Great. How about yourself?
Hanging in there, doing pretty good. Weather's turning a little bit. We are into mid-October at the time we're taping this one. So, it's good to get some cooler temperatures, sleeping better at night anyway. So
nice.
It's cool outside. But let's pick up our conversation and get back into it. Disability, long-term care, I think that's going to be the focus today, yeah?
Yeah, those are really the top two things. I mean, nobody wants to talk about those, obviously. And, you know, even statistically, they're a little bit more important the later in career you are. Two of our last three topics to really hit on the contingency planning side here, making sure that we got a good plan in place for not really if, but when things go wrong.
Yeah. Well, let's just dive right in. So let's talk about the possibility of disability. I mean, it can happen, right? It can and does, especially if you're talking about pilots. Something could come up. There could be a number of things that could cause you to kind of go into this, check this box, if you will.
Yeah. And candidly, when you look at, what they're getting through their employer, a lot of the top airliners have great disability programs. And so it tends to be something, especially on the short-term side, that is definitely already planned for from the company's perspective. You know, where many times we can see a gap is if guys and gals are getting into like a long-term disability standpoint, especially if they were hurt outside of work. And it can be, unfortunately, it can be something really not that major, right? I mean, if you have a significant hand injury, in terms of your impact to your whole life, hey, man, you're going to still have all your cognitive ability. You're still probably going to be able to do many of the activities of daily living. But that could severely impact your ability to do your job as a pilot if you have a.
So are we talking like an additional or a different kind of disability insurance for pilots that can help them with that? Is there like kind of a unique thing there? Or?
It's airline specific, but really what it's making sure is that, hey, if I'm going to take a significant pay cut for a certain amount of time, then I need to know that my household is still going to be protected. Because realistically, if you're looking at the disability policy and many of the major carriers, their airline carriers, they're really protecting them off of their base pay. I mean, a lot of these guys are doing a lot of overtime, and then they build a lifestyle around a lot of that overtime. And so when you look at, especially if they're mastering that game for getting certain green slips or whatever the case is, where they can kind of be on reserve and then take a last minute flight that pays really good. There's a lot of, I don't want to call them games, but there's a lot of methods that these guys use to and deploy to really increase the pay to the house. Well, the policies that they're getting through work are not necessarily covering that. So there is a lot of times where even though the policy that they're getting through work is maybe adequate to cover a lot of their base pay, when you look at the pay actually hitting the checking account every month that the lifestyle and the needs to support the family are built around, there can be a big gap between what I actually need to do for my family to do what they want to do and for us to have the lifestyle and house that we want, compared to what the company is going to pay me if I do get disabled.
Any issues, Scott, when it comes to, I guess, like the portability or the usefulness, and maybe even with unions, obviously there's a lot of rules and things. So I guess depending on why you get put on disability, does that factor at all?
Well, the why does factor in a little bit. Obviously, if it's work related, it's going to be workman comp.
Sure. Yeah.
And then there's other items that, the airline might actually want you to get fixed. I mean, I was working with a guy from Southwest who's getting an eye thing done, and the airline wants him to proactively get it done. And so that disability circumstance is different than if he would have, hurt it boating or shooting or something like that. And so the policies, are written differently and pay out differently based off of the cause of disability, the length you're going to be disabled, and the severity of it. Can I do light duty at work and be like maybe a supervising or training pilot on the administrative side? Or am I I can't do any jobs for the company. I got to be completely off work. And so, based off of what they have going on, the policies will pay out a little bit different. The unions have really been huge advocates for increasing the benefits of these policies. So they've been a great advocate for that, and a real help to get, really good benefit packages for these pilots. But again, the root issue is really your checking account doesn't care about any of that. The checking account just knows I'm used to getting X amount of dollars per month, and is what's going to come out of my policies if I'm disabled going to give me enough money to keep everything in the checking account happy. That's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, very true. All right, so that's one piece of it. What about the long-term care aspect?
Yeah, so just real briefly on the long-term care side, this is something that I'll say most people don't care about until they're reaching retirement age. Yeah. And when they're reaching retirement age, they really start to think about all the retirement considerations, and so I might be 60, 65, getting close to my mandatory retirement date. And I'm thinking, oh man, my parents just got done going through this nursing home thing, and I just saw it wipe out $1, $2, $3, $400,000 of their life savings. And I better do something about that. If you got some of the younger guys, maybe under 50 years old, they've not seen their parents go through it yet. And it hasn't really hit them that it's pretty real that 1 out of 2 people over age 70 are going to spend on average 2 years in a nursing home. And the easy math is about $100K per year. And so when you're younger, it can really be cost prohibitive and not make a lot of sense to be purchasing like long-term care insurance. To me, it can be really just candidly a waste of money. But what we can do is build a plan early to fund those expenses out there and just acknowledge the fact that statistically we're going to incur some sort of long-term care expenses between either myself or my wife. And then at the end of the day, if we get those assets in place and get those policies in place working for us, it enables us to retire knowing that we've already solved that. We've used the time on our side to compound these assets in a way that we mitigate that long-term risk or long-term care risk. And then ultimately what we love about some of these different policies that we'll use, they're not use it or lose it long-term care policies. I mean, and that's something that a lot of people, it shies them away from long-term care. Man, I don't want to pay hundreds of dollars a month for something I may or may not use.
Yeah, the cost is crazy, and then you feel like, hey, if I lose this, I'm just tossing money down the drain. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And so for most of our folks, I mean, and when you look at long-term care, you have, if it's going to cost, let's say the average household $200,000 in retirement. If you're somebody who has less than $300,000 in retirement savings, it's basically like, don't even worry about it. All your assets are going to get spent down and you're going to go on Medicaid. I'm not saying that's a great outcome, but if you have hardly anything saved up, it just kind of is what it is. Yeah. At the same token, if you got $10, $20 million in the bank, you're like, whatever, that's a few months of dividend payments and I'll just pay for it. It's no big deal. I'm self-insured. If you're in that $1 million to $4 million range, I mean, taking a 10% hit in the later stages of retirement is not fun. And so if we can cost effectively mitigate that early on, that's a really effective thing that a lot of our folks like. And so we always recommend, there's a certain way that you can structure insurance policies that really give you that benefit to mitigate the risk of long-term care. Mm-hmm. And then if you don't use it, the value of that policy pays out to your beneficiaries tax-free. So it gives us a way that we really build some tax-free wealth. And then if we need the long-term care dollars, they're right there that we can go out there and use them. And so again, it's more so taking just time to think. And this is a 10-minute thought exercise. Mm-hmm. Hey, let's just look at the numbers. Let's think about where we're at, the assets we have, the income we have. Does it make sense for us to carve out a little bit of our income now to contingency plan for this, knowing that if we don't need it, it's going to go to my beneficiaries tax-free. And then if I do need it, it's right there. I mean, it's like a parachute. Better to need it or better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Is your 401k working as hard as you are? Let's find out at thepilotsplanner.com to get started with your free full thrust 401k toolkit. Come see what a good financial co-pilot can do to help make sure your retirement is ready to take flight. Visit us at thepilotsplanner.com. That's thepilotsplanner.com.
And I think that's important, right? Especially when you're talking about retirement strategies of any kind, is having some sort of, parachute you can pull the ripcord on. So a little bit more in that contingency planning conversation. So if you got some questions, need some help, definitely make sure you're reaching out to qualified professionals, especially folks who, do this, like Scott and his team. So check the show notes for this week's details. We got all the links and all the information in there. That way, if you want to get some time on the calendar with them, you can certainly do that. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all that good kind of stuff. Any final points that I didn't bring up that you need to hit before we wrap this one up this week, Scott?
No, I mean, again, I'm looking forward to our next episode too, really talking through, the contingency planning on the career side. But, as we talked about with all these topics, these are not the fun, exciting ones to get done, but they're the ones that really mean the most to the people that we care about around us. And so it's important to lean into this work. It doesn't take long, but lean into it, get it done.
Great point indeed. Again, check the show note details. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, thumbs up, and ring the bell for notifications. And we'll see you next time here on the Wealthy Pilots Podcast with Scott Osborn.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.